Thank you, Madam Deputy President. Every single Australian and their family is doing it tough, yet every single day we hear from this government, and particularly the Treasurer, that it is everyone else's fault other than that of the government. And rather than taking responsibility, rather than accepting—
Just a moment. Senator Hughes, you will need to move the resolution first. Doesn't need to. My apologies. Please just continue. I know you don't have to at all. I was getting some other advice, so please.
Okay, we're all
continue.
Good. You were just worried I was getting into a bit of a pattern there, and you thought you'll just interrupt that flow.
Senator Hughes, we did. The clock was stopped, so please continue giving your contribution to the debate.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President, Acting Deputy President. We know that this government has spent its entire term fighting everything except inflation. They have spent this entire term trying to divide our nation, tear this nation apart by its very fabric. We know the $500 million spent on the referendum with its whole objective to divide this nation by race. They have done everything they can to not look at inflation. We know that those in the government benches now have forgotten that COVID occurred. All of a sudden, that is the word that cannot be spoken. It's like $275 that was coming off our energy bills, the number that can never speak its name. But we now know as well that we don't mention COVID because we don't want to acknowledge what was happening over the last few years of the coalition government. But even with that, this government inherited low unemployment, inherited strong growth, and they inherited a government that was well on the way to recovery out of COVID. And when you look at how our country performed throughout COVID, how many jobs were saved, was extraordinary. But they have managed to just tip all the cookies out of the cookie jar, spill the mess everywhere, and continue to make it absolutely appalling for every single household. And the reality is we've been in a per capita recession for 18 months. And those that sit on the Treasury benches may be in denial about this, but I'll tell you who's not in denial about the fact that we are in a per capita recession. We have been for 18 months, and that is every single Australian family whose mortgage repayments, the interest repayments alone, have increased by 3 times, triple repayments on those interest rates. It's extraordinary, the pressure that is being put on Australian families, yet those opposite seem to almost make fun of the situation. They're one step off saying Australians have never had it so good. And the reason they need to keep tottering out the same talking points is because Australians don't believe them. Australians aren't feeling it. Australians know that they have to find, the average Australian family needs to find an extra $35,000 a year. $35,000 a year, that's not the kind of cash that's just hiding down the back of the lounge. $35,000 a year the average Australian family is having to find. Yet this government will not take any responsibility. They will continue to project every single one of their failures onto someone else. I mean, it was just incredible to hear the Treasurer come out and started to hark back to the Ukraine war. I mean, it was, that was their line when they first came in 2.5 years ago. It is everybody else's fault but theirs. But we know that the sticky inflation is staying so sticky because of everything that they're doing. Because as the RBA tries to slow the economy down to get inflation back under control through its lever of interest rate rises, what we're seeing here is a government addicted to spending, a government who has over $300 billion of new spending. We have a government who is actually taking no notice of what's happening in the private sector, the sector that actually creates jobs, the market. They're not taking any notice of what's happening in the marketplace and the private sector and the slowdowns, and they're artificially buoying the economy through directly paying and increasing the public service and workforce in those care economies. It is not sustainable. In fact, hearing it described as a Ponzi scheme today is probably the best description of the way that this government is handling the economy. Australia cannot afford another term of government with those sitting there opposite at the moment. It is extraordinary how this economy is continuing to contract. Australians are continuing to do it tough and tougher every single day, and there is no end in sight. There is no end in sight. Things just look like they're going to keep getting worse. No one's happy about it. You're the government. Do something about it.
Thank you, Senator.